Unmute. There I am. Hello.
There's everybody.
Hello.
Hi, Becky.
Wondering what was going on.
Sorry I was late.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Jeff.
Greetings.
Hello.
Hello.
You'll have to excuse me. I'm eating dinner. I was vaccinated earlier today and didn't have time to have lunch, so I do apologize. I will turn my audio, my camera off at some point when the meeting gets started to finish. Oh, I don't see Rita or April.
Rita's gonna be.
Oh, I see Rita.
Okay, good. She said maybe by phone.
And April.
I'm back, so I'm here.
You're here. Okay, thank you. I wish Zoom had the ability to pin a couple of people in the corner, but that's not the case today. That's not the case in their tool chest.
Donna is here.
I see Donna.
Is Jeff, is Deacon here as well?
I'm here.
Yeah, Deacon's here.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
Maybe Deacon wants to adjust his computer screen a little bit so that yeah, something like that. There you go.
Yeah.
I'm gonna call April.
Okay. Hi, Diane. I see you waving.
I was going to suggest we were asked last time to put our identification on.
Good point.
So we might want to do that again. And I have to figure out how to do it myself.
Do other committees, the Historical Commission and Planning Board, have quorums? Yes, no?
The planning board does.
Henry, you should be off mute. If we do. Henry, me, Mary Lou, and Greg. Is Greg there? Greg Colton?
Saw him.
Yes, Greg. We have a HC has a quorum.
Great.
Okay.
And April will be here in just a second.
Okay. Becky, I'm only signed in once tonight.
Okay, that makes it easy on the co-host.
Well, why don't I call the planning board to order since we do have a quorum?
Go for it.
I did.
Okay.
Henry, you need to do the same thing.
We get a gold star.
I'll wait another second or two for April just to
Okay, I guess
to order it once.
we'll call the Historical Commission to order.
Thank you.
My camera's out.
Oh, darn.
Is it not working at all, Henry?
It's not working. The connection somehow is gone. I don't know what's happening.
Can you see everyone else?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Henry, is it a laptop?
Yep.
Try, there's right up at the top where it snaps shut, there's a little widget that slides back and forth. Try that.
Little widget.
At the top, left
top,
or right?
No, at the very top where, you know, where it would be, like where your camera is. There's a little sliding thing that goes back and forth. Try that.
Oh. No, I don't. No. I'm looking at the settings. Anyway, I can still function without it. It's just not. Okay.
I see April is here. April, I'm going to call the select board to order. All right.
Yeah, I was waiting at the wrong meeting.
Okay.
Sorry.
It happens. Zoom life. Yeah. Okay, well, welcome everybody. Is there any other people need to call themselves to order besides those 3 committees? No? Okay.
That's what's posted.
Okay, no, just want to double check.
Yeah.
So we've scheduled this meeting there's a lot going on with the solar, there's a lot going on with the bylaw. And I know this is particularly to talk about the bylaw, and Becky can help guide me through some of the communications we've had, but and I know Donna's here to help us as well. So I'm willing to take suggestions on where we start, because there is a lot I think we were going to cover.
Yeah, I was imagining from the questions the select board had that maybe you start out by asking the planning board to outline how they determined the amendments were necessary that were passed to the solar bylaw that were passed in June, and start off just maybe Jeff can give a rundown of why these changes were needed for the bylaw.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about that?
Well, yes, you can ask a question.
That seems like a very odd place to start. It seems like we're defending what town meeting voted on last year.
I think what is a good place to start, because there's a lot of people here that may or may not have been in that process, just to give a summary of why, not necessarily to backtrack on what was voted, but what initiated the bylaw. I think what Becky, you're asking, and the select board had said a few times in our meeting, is what prompted the changes, and how that kind of got going. We're not going to backtrack about what they were voted in by town meeting. We're not going to backtrack on that, but we'd like to just a summary of how it got started, because there's a lot of people on the Zoom call that don't have a background in the whole process. So just a simple rundown of how that process got started.
Can I offer an alternative, which is at the select board meeting, I think it was on March 1st, the select board said they had concerns about the solar bylaw, and it might be appropriate for the select board to articulate what their concerns are, and we can respond to them.
I think we do both.
Yes, I agree with Melissa. Let's start with a sort of how we got to where we are. I think that would be helpful.
So does someone from the planning board want to just give a simple rundown of what questions they started with the process of updating the bylaw that brought us to town meeting? And
I can give the most basic of an outline.
I think that's what we're looking for.
If this was going to be a presentation that someone from the planning board would have had to have made, it would have been nice to know ahead of time, and we could have prepared appropriate graphics for you and stuff like that. But now we got to dredge up our memories from a few years ago. The first project, Wheelock, was done without a solar bylaw. And we dubbed it light industrial. They didn't object to that. And we regulated it by a special permit for light industrial use. And during the course of the Wheelock, we learned an awful lot about solar projects. And almost simultaneously with approving the Wheelock and getting done with the special permit, we developed the first solar bylaw. There were actually 2 competing bylaws, one by an interested group of people in town, and then another one by the planning board. And we reconciled those a little bit and adopted those pretty quickly, mostly from the experience that we had with Wheelock. And then a year or so or 2 goes by, and we realized that there are quite a few other sites that are eligible for solar and where applicants could be interested that are different from Wheelock, different circumstances perhaps. We also learn a little more about solar regulations from our regional planning agencies and case law and things like that. So with all that in mind, we decided to try to equip Shutesbury with the best, most up-to-date solar bylaw in the state, we believe, which we did in 2020 when we introduced our 8 or 10 amendments to the solar bylaw, and that was passed. Then right on the heels of that, Pelham came in and took our bylaw and adapted it, and they have a very similar one, perhaps even a little tighter than we. But it's just a learning process that started out from not thinking about solar at all to thinking an awful lot about it.
If I could add one thing just on Jeff, since all municipalities are learning about solar, somewhere in the last couple of months, the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, which serves Hampden and Hampshire County, put out a best practices guide, which is pretty comprehensive around solar bylaws and solar development, and highlighted Shutesbury as a model bylaw. So we're being held up in the region, at least, as having a model bylaw.
All right, thank you. So, and I know, and I'm gonna have April and Rita pop in here. The questions that the select board has had is, and I know we brought Donna here too, are the, what are the challenges that the bylaw might see? How is, you know, how restrictive is this? There's heading into potential projects, you know, where are the questions going to happen? What will be challenged and that sort of thing. Rita and April, did you have any other questions? I know we went through a few of them and I was looking for the paper that we had, and I don't, but anyway, Rita and April, the questions that you had.
Yeah, I think what I had asked at one of the other meetings, and I think Donna was at, I'm not sure which meeting it was whether or not, you know, we've been told that this is a very restrictive bylaw, and felt like it could be challenged in a number of instances. And we discussed whether or not there was any case law regarding it being challenged. And I gather from what I've seen, a couple of emails that I've seen from recently, is there is very recent case law. So what I was hoping we could talk about at this joint meeting is what those cases said and where Shutesbury might be vulnerable to litigation.
And I totally agree with what you just said. Yes.
That's where the select board falls on this.
Donna has.
So Donna, go ahead. Thank you for raising your hand in the video.
Yeah. So bottom line is the issue, as Jeff and I think Michael and the rest of the planning board are well aware, is whether or not the Shutesbury zoning bylaw can be challenged under the Dover Amendment. And just so everybody in the meeting's clear, the Dover Amendment really is based on Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 3, that basically restricts zoning bylaws on educational uses, religious uses, agricultural uses, and solar is one of the uses included within that bylaw. Not to get too far into the weeds, but certain of those uses, educational, religious, agriculture, are really limited in how you can restrict them under zoning. Solar and a few others are limited as to reasonable regulations. So the challenges around solar bylaws that have recently come into the land court, which is the court that's dealing with this right now, which is one of the lowest courts, hasn't gone to the appeals court yet, hasn't gone to the SJC, but it's in the land court right now, is whether or not solar bylaws in effect prohibit solar arrays from being established in town. And so obviously if you prohibit it entirely, that's an unreasonable regulation and the bylaw will be struck down. Of course, the cases are never that black and white. So basically you review the bylaw to see if overall, taken in practical terms, if you look at the land and the land uses in the town, whether you're so restricting solar arrays that they're impractical. Jeff and I have discussed this at length. Michael Pill was really, really helpful in giving us significant documents that he's filing land court on a similar case right now. Jeff and I think Michael as well, have reviewed the leading case, which talks about striking down a solar bylaw, because the cases before we had, when we passed the bylaw in 2020, basically weren't striking down any solar bylaws. In the last 6 months, the Sutton Land Court's judges, in particular Judge Piper, has beginning to really question them. So when Jeff and Michael and I really looked at our solar bylaw, the one place where I felt that it was really could be challenged was the issue of access through the rural residential or town center zoning bylaws to get to the forest conservation, which is of course where solar is allowed. And of course, that's a huge swath of the district. So if you can get into forest conservation to develop solar arrays, clearly they're not prohibited in Shutesbury, because forest conservation is a huge part of our community if you look at the zoning district map. So Jeff has proposed, and we've been working a little bit today on changing the bylaw, hopefully at annual this year, to do away with the problem that was identified. Under the law, if you have a use, an access to a use, the access itself is considered the use. So if solar is not allowed in rural residential, but it's allowed in forest conservation, but you have to access through rural residential to get to forest conservation, you can't access. And that, of course, makes no sense. And as Jeff pointed out, there's a lot of uses allowed in forest conservation that in effect, you need access through rural residential where they may not be allowed. So the planning board's proposing an amendment to the bylaw for this year that would in effect say that if the use is allowed in forest conservation, access through rural residential to get there is a permitted use as well.
Anna, can I ask you a clarifying question?
Sure.
It was my understanding from the exchange that we were thinking about amending the use table, not the bylaw.
Well, the use table is the bylaw, part of the bylaw.
Not the solar bylaw, though, the zoning bylaw.
Right. No, we would be amending the use table because it's generally an issue with the zoning bylaw in general that we want to allow. You have to be able to get into forest conservation, and to get there, you almost undoubtedly have to go through rural residential. So just to really clean up the bylaw, we would amend the use table to allow access into forest conservation. Now, I know that AMP had 1, 2, 3, 4 other issues that they felt they didn't like about the solar bylaw. But each of those we addressed at the last meeting, showing that there was either a waiver provision or it just didn't restrict them. If they asked for a waiver and they had a good project, it didn't restrict them. The only issue left of their 5 that I think is an interesting issue is that they don't like the 1,000-foot max driveway. They claim they want to make longer driveways. And that's really a planning board decision on whether or a town decision on whether longer driveways should be allowed. There's, needless to say, most zoning bylaws have 1,000 feet or shorter for driveways. Maintenance issues, drainage issues, effect on other land, effect on the abutting property, real estate to the driveways. So that's very, very standard in zoning bylaws, but AMP clearly didn't like that because I believe that at least one of the projects, they want a 3,800-foot driveway going into that project from a public way. But I believe that the amendment that the planning board's proposing addresses the real concern with our solar bylaw for land court case purposes that are ongoing right this instant, and the main one that I had concerns about. Jeff?
Thank you, Don.
You're welcome.
Donna?
You're muted.
Jeff, you're muted.
Donna, what do you want me to say?
Well, fill in. I don't know if I got it all.
Oh, I think you do. I mean, we're going to take care of that that access. It was never the intention that access to FC be restricted through RR, because FC is by nature a landlocked district without contact to any roads. So the fix is going to be easy on that one, and it's not a painful fix because we never intended it to begin with. The 1,000-foot driveway, you know, that's been in our bylaw since 2008, maybe. I think we did it then, or maybe a little after, but it's been in there for a while. And I mean, I think that's a good thing for Shutesbury. It allows people to get back far enough for privacy, get back of other houses if they want, but not penetrate too deeply into our large forest blocks, which kind of categorize or characterize the town, and have their own worthwhile recreational and ecological purposes. So, so I think the 1,000-foot is a good thing to have, and you know, there is the zoning variance. If you know, that is an outlet. It's a difficult outlet, but that could be proposed in some circumstances, and that would go to the ZBA. So it's not entirely impossible to go longer than 1,000 feet. You just have to justify it.
I see Andrew's hand. Andrew.
Thank you very much. Hi everyone. I just wanted to quickly introduce myself. My name is Andrew Chabot. I am a senior project manager with AMP. I haven't met anyone yet, but I wanted to quickly introduce myself. I know you're familiar with Evan, who's a consultant for AMP, who was interacting with the town previously. This is my first time I've really attended one of these meetings, but I wanted to, first of all, just offer an unconditional apology that the litigation issue was raised at all. That is not part of the plan at all with AMP. And really, the issue, as you're all discussing now, is just the issue of access. And that's kind of what the intent was initially, just to try to figure out a way to get around that. But really, the intent of AMP moving forward is just to be working with the town to figure out what works best with the town. And I'm happy to do that, and really looking forward to the dialogue. So I just wanted to very quickly, not derail anything, but just, you know, say hi. I'm here, really happy to answer any questions anyone has, just to be a resource to provide AMP's perspective on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I see Jeff's hand.
What position do you have with AMP?
I'm a senior project manager with AMP. I'm based in Massachusetts.
Okay, would that be some type of engineering position, planning?
That's a great question. No, I'm not an engineer by trade, but we have engineers on our team that I work closely with. So I help direct all that.
Are you comparable to Evan, or are you the new Evan, or?
That's correct. I am. Yes.
But you're on staff as opposed to a consultant.
That's also correct.
I think Evan has his hand up, Melissa.
Oh, okay.
Just
Evan,
noticing.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, guys. There's perfect transition there. So, you know, part of Andrew coming in here was that AMP decided, I think, and rightly so, that you guys and the town in this process should have its own fully dedicated, you know, project manager, because certainly it's going to be large enough and important enough. So Andrew is, you know, a seasoned solar veteran, and he's going to step in and be your sole point of contact for everything. You know, I think we've got off, you know, to a good and a bad start. So Andrew is going to carry this forward, and I think he's definitely the right fit for this work. As Cinda says, he wears a lot of plaid. So that's a real good start. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, Evan.
So I guess, what else does the select board want to know?
Yeah. Donna?
Yeah, I think the only other issue that we've discussed, or at least Becky and I have discussed fairly well at length, is the provision about consulting the Historical Commission around cultural landscapes that's in the solar bylaw. I've expressed concern about the language in that section, particularly the language that says Shutesbury area, because I'm not really clear what the Shutesbury area is. And so I just had a few questions about that specific provision and how vague it is, or how it has some vagueness to it, rather than the concept, which Shutesbury clearly strongly supported when that first initial zoning bylaw was passed, about making sure that the cultural landscapes in Shutesbury were identified and taken care of. And I think Miriam has had a good meeting with AMP around that issue. And so maybe it's time for the Historical Commission to sort of chime in on where they think that part of the bylaw, how that's an issue.
And I see Miriam's hand.
Yeah. I'd be happy to say something, but I had a quick question for Donna. When you say Shutesbury area, I don't have the bylaw in front of me. Was that about which tribes?
Well, no, it was about which tribes, but the way the language is right in the bylaw, and I should have brought it, I apologize,
No, okay.
Is that it says,
I have it right here.
Yeah, the part that says tribes that are associated with the
area. That consider this area significant. Okay.
Yeah, no, not the area within Shutesbury, but the Shutesbury area, like it's larger than Shutesbury, and I just don't know how much larger we're talking.
So can I just read it?
I think I can explain. I think I can explain that though. How that gets.
Michael, could you put it up on? If I make you co-host, you want to put it up on the screen for people?
It's just a sentence. It's really easy. It's about the notification of tribes, and it says all federally or state recognized tribal historic preservation officers with any cultural or land affiliation to the Shutesbury area.
Yeah,
so that's the reference. And then
so I can explain that.
And the same thing with cultural and inland affiliation to the Shutesbury area.
Yeah.
So I would like to really encourage everybody on this meeting to go to the Historical Commission's homepage and the website. We've written a couple of reports, and one of them is specifically we discuss our interpretation of these provisions in the bylaw. And so we did that for the town boards. So, you know, as we're discussing this, we spelled it out. I know it's kind of tedious to read the report, but I really would like to encourage you, because I think it's very clear that if you are involved in the field of cultural resource management, including archaeology and ceremonial stone landscape research, it is very clear you'll understand which tribes would be appropriate. So it's kind of like making a reference to what are the criteria for certifying a vernal pool under Massachusetts law. Well, if you go to an expert in wetland science, they can tell you what the criteria are for certifying a vernal pool. So we don't expect that everybody just knows this, but this is something that can be looked up, or you can consult with a professional or an expert and easily get the answer. There are 2 federally recognized tribes in Massachusetts. There are 2 in Connecticut. There's 1 in Rhode Island. And then there's a whole slew of of state recognized tribes. There's a few in Massachusetts. There's a state recognized tribe in Vermont that has some cultural ties to this area. There are, you know, a couple of federally recognized tribes not in Massachusetts that historically have a tie to this region, including, oddly enough, a tribe that's currently based in Wisconsin, the Stockbridge-Munsee Band of the Mohican, originally originated in Western Massachusetts. So all of these tribes are composed of the descendants of people who lived in this area, and they claim this area as being part of their heritage area. And they coordinate with each other, particularly around the federal tribes. So, you know, if you work with one federal tribe, chances are they would be obligated to notify the other federal tribes that they're involved. And sometimes they come to agreements that only one tribe will take the lead, or sometimes it'll be multiple tribes that want to be involved. But this happens every day of the week, every month of the year. with federal undertakings and projects that fall under the National Historic Preservation Act. So cultural resource managers and experts in this area, including archaeologists, they know how to do this, and they can easily shepherd a developer through this process.
So Miriam, you're saying that the cultural, the Shutesbury area refers to
Western Massachusetts.
Refers to the tribes connected with it, not a landmass larger than Shutesbury.
No. I'm talking.
I mean, our zoning bylaw needs to deal with Shutesbury, not areas outside Shutesbury. That's what I'm trying to go with it.
The concept of territory, as we think of territory, and boundaries, state boundaries, town boundaries, aren't really relevant for tribal history and how they defined their ties to land. And their connections are often tied by shared language, shared culture, and whether there was a history of intermarriage traditionally between those groups. So the tribal groups or the indigenous groups that lived in this region and probably set foot in Shutesbury in the 16th century and the early 17th century, their descendants are now reflected in these current day, modern day tribes. Right, but there is no base of a tribe here in Western Massachusetts any longer.
No, and I get that, but how does that relate to talking specifically about land in Shutesbury, which is the only land we have the right to zone?
What we're saying is that you consult with a tribal historic preservation officer of a tribe, of an appropriate tribe that is related to this area and has a claim to this area, and then you consult on what would be the plan. And you know, as a point of example, because I think, you know, in the abstract, it's hard to wrap your brain around it, but this morning, Henry Geddes and Janice Stone and I met with Cinda Jones and a couple of her staff, her employees, to talk about this, along with a researcher who's part of a company that does ceremonial stone landscape research. And we discussed a proposal that Coles is bringing forward that would involve the Wampanoag tribe of Gayhead-Aquina, which is a federally recognized tribe based in Massachusetts. It is a tribe that's an Algonquin tribe with kinship ties to the peoples that lived here in this area and use this land. So it's an appropriate tribe. And it's also one that the Historical Commission has been in dialogue with. There's a proposal on the table that's still yet to be fleshed out that would involve working with that tribe. So I don't, you know, I know this sounds sort of like very abstract and how would you do it? But in fact, there's a proposal that's being worked on right now that would effectuate what
that seems to sort of make my point that what we're talking about when we talk about the Shutesbury area is all of the tribes that are connected to the Shutesbury area, which you don't define just as a town, but you define as a larger area because of all the things you described. But that when we're talking about where the cultural landscapes are that are relative to this zoning bylaw, and relative to you basically saying to the planning board, there are cultural landscapes on this land that's the subject of the permit, that we're talking about a finite piece of land. We're not.
Yes, of course we are.
Yeah, no, okay, well, that was where I was trying to go.
I'm sorry. We're talking about tracts of land that may have stone groupings that are maybe of cultural significance to tribal groups. And the point is to invite input from tribal groups. And there's nothing that bars a developer from kind of getting ahead of the process by reaching out to one or more tribes ahead of time in order to begin that process and to begin the consultation process. That, you know, that was the point of my report. We said it over and again in the report. I think we belabored the point, but you know, early consultation resolves a lot of difficulties because by the time you get to submitting the special permit application, some of these issues would already be ironed out. And then it's just a matter of showing in your application hey, this is the process. This is who we talked to. These were their recommendations. This is how we responded to those recommendations. And this is what we came up with.
And I think that at least when I was talking to the select board, their concern and my concern about that language was that I understood that there could be numbers of tribes because of the connections to the Shutesbury area and Western Massachusetts and all of that. But just to be very clear that a cultural landscape in Wendell would not necessarily be part of a permitting process in Shutesbury. And that's all I want to clarify.
Well, except I would say this, Donna.
Go ahead.
Let's say, for example, you've got a set of stone features that you discover that are in some sort of alignment with ceremonial stone landscapes that are outside of the border of Shutesbury. Now, we're not regulating what happens outside the borders of Shutesbury. That's not the purpose of town board. But for the purposes of interpretation, in terms of understanding the context, that could be highly significant. And a lot of ceremonial stone landscapes are built in alignment with one another, as well as with other kinds of astronomical events and ordinal directions. So I don't think the area, that word, is all that misleading if you're knowledgeable and you understand how to apply these things.
Okay.
Can I clarify something?
Yeah, go ahead.
The language in that section is specifically about notification. So all it's saying is which people a developer is supposed to notify to find if they have interest. And I don't think there's any assumption or in black and white that it says we would regulate anything beyond the bounds of Shutesbury, but it's about who we're inviting to provide input, which is a very different, it's invite wide and regulate strictly around the borders of the town.
And I think that's just really important because I think people were confused about that section. And it's important for people to understand that we're only talking about permitting and what's in the land that we're permitting. Mm-hmm. How we get the information on how that's culturally relevant, why it's important, all of those issues are going to be much broader, the input into that piece of it. Yeah. But the land itself is what's going to be ultimately looked at for the permitting process.
Donna, I'm just, well, go ahead.
Well, just to respond to the question before about, whether we wanted to explain what was discussed. And I did send out my report to all the boards. I'll post that report on the Shutesbury Historical Commission's homepage. So if people who are here who want to read it can read it. So this was just a preliminary meeting that we had, and I understand that a lot of things need to get worked out, and there's no there at this point. There's no written agreements. My understanding is that Coles will need to be coordinating and making some decisions with AMP around that. But the tentative idea, if it were to come to fruition, was to hire a research company that is has expertise in ceremonial stone landscape mapping and surveying, and then to develop a formal consultation relationship with a federal tribal historic preservation officer who would go on the site and assist in the interpretation, and then come up with a mitigation plan.
And I was just curious, Donna, if there's any case law set regarding solar installation and native stone sites.
No, there's no case law, but there's a lot of case law on archaeological sites and preservation of them and the importance of them. It's relative to development, but not specifically solar development, but rather, now there may be in other states. Solar development's been more broad in, there may be in other states, although I don't know how well they protect their archaeological sites, but there's no doubt about it. In Massachusetts, archaeological sites are considered very important. and the Mass Historical and local historical commissions are tasked with preserving them and protecting them. And that specific language was very specifically by the town put into our solar bylaw to recognize that that's an important part of Shutesbury history and needed to be honored. I just wanted to be very clear on how that was being interpreted to make sure that we weren't sort of overreaching with our bylaw. And I think Michael's exactly right. We notify a lot of people, but once those people are notified and give their input, then whatever the mitigation is or the restrictions are very specific to the project site, and in particular to the parts of the project site that may very well have these important artifacts.
Could I just throw in one more comment about this? One of the points that we made in the report was that the provisions, and we weren't involved. I don't know if I wasn't on the historical commission last year, so I don't know if the historical commission got involved with the revisions or not. I wasn't involved, but what I see when I interpret the bylaw is that in many ways it mimics and recreates the same kind of process that you see federal agencies requiring of developers when there's a federal undertaking and Section 106. And so really, in terms of reasonableness, we're saying, okay, here's a process that the federal agencies require of developers every day of the week, 12 months of the year. And it's considered legal and reasonable on the federal level. So it's hard to see how on the local level, it's unreasonable when you're dealing with a large development project that's maybe even larger than some of the ones involving federal undertakings. It's really requiring the same process. So there's really two options. If there is no federal undertaking, then we're basically recreating what Section 106 would require. And if Section 106 is involved because there is a federal undertaking, then we're not burdening the developer with anything they wouldn't have to do anyway. So it's hard to see how that would be unreasonable, asking them to do something that they have to do anyway in order to get the permits they need.
And I don't think our bylaws as extensive as 106.
And it's not. It doesn't. Exactly.
And I would just cite, the Historical Commission's report because, the original version of the bylaw said identify, these important sacred properties, and the additions were. Besides just identify them, articulate if there's going to be some kind of negative effect, and then have a mitigation plan. And I think to underscore what the Historical Commission's report said is that there's no prescription about what mitigation is. There's a wide range of options for mitigation. And so, that giving options for mitigation is not equal to prohibition. And that's really important. That's how it comes reasonable.
Right, and that was kind of the point of the report. We go through like a whole list of different kinds of approaches to mitigation that could be considered. So there are lots of different options.
So basically, Donna, what you've been saying is that the bylaw with this one small change, relatively small change, should keep us where we should be in terms of protecting the town from liability. And I welcome AMP's not wanting to sue the town, because that is not the way we do business.
Well, and I think we need to be careful of our terms. The town doesn't have any liability if they have a zoning bylaw that overreaches. The courts just tell them that it's not legal. I mean, and we've overreached, and we either rewrite it very rapidly or we end up with no bylaw, and developers have a much wider path to develop in Shutesbury because of it. So it's not like it's a damages or lawsuit kind of situation. We're protected by Chapter 258, and it's one of the things that we still have sovereign immunity, and you can't sue a town for monetary damages based on that. So I don't see that as the issue here. What I see as the issue is that the town's trying to do a very thoughtful balance between protecting our natural resources and protecting the community and atmosphere of Shutesbury, and at the same time allowing development that will help with the tax rate and help with all of the issues that we have monetarily. And so that's where I see this. And I think that addressing what AMP felt were the restrictions of the bylaw and really finding the ones that we felt were problematical, as opposed to a bit more restrictive than not having any solar bylaw or having a weak line one like some communities. We needed to sort of sort through the bylaw and see where those were. And I think after really sorting through it conscientiously, the access piece was the problematical piece, and the rest is strict, no doubt about it. But it's strict for a reason, and that's what Shutesbury supported when they voted to, you know, adopt this bylaw.
Becky, I saw your hand.
Yeah, Donna, I just wanted you to review the word suspected in the first sentence of number 3 for the required documents. It reads, locations of all known, mapped, or suspected Native American archaeological sites or sites of Native American ceremonial activity. I know this has come up a few times and people have questioned why whether or not the word suspected is broader than it needs to be, or, you know, if you were just suspecting it, the potential for it to exist doesn't have to be there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair question, Becky. I think suspected obviously is more restrictive than not having suspected in there. I don't see that that's subject to a bylaw challenge unless it would be for vagueness. I think that suspected, from the readings, the Historical Commission's documents and some of the other things that I've read since the last meeting, is a term of art for archaeology, given that some things just can't be as concretized around these issues as others. But I think that's certainly worthy of discussion by this group on whether the word suspected is an issue or not. But I think it comes from other statutory provisions, and it's fairly typical in this realm.
Miriam, I saw your hand first and then Michael.
So my reading of it is, it says all known, mapped, or
suspected.
Or suspected. So that tells me that if they go out and map stone features, that suffices that piece of it. It's not that they have to do all of those things. It's either one or it's 1, 2, or the third. But the reason I think, and maybe Michael, you know, I didn't draft this, so maybe I'm wrong in the choice of language, but the way it makes sense to me is that for an archaeologist or a developer to say, this is a ceremonial stone landscape is kind of a step too far in sort of naming something that is not knowable through our cultural lens, that it has to be interpreted through a traditional community's expertise or through a tribal representative's expertise. And so I think that's why it's there, and that's how I interpreted it. Well, Michael, did you?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, it's just the preceding sentence to what we were talking about before about notification. And so what it says is that it is about mapping, and it's about mapping known and suspected areas based on the responses that the planning board gets and the developer gets from that outreach to people. So if you do a broad outreach and you get responses, the idea is to catalog and say, we know this for sure and we suspect this. It's a sequential process that you can't do due diligence and investigation unless you have some kind of inventory of what you're looking for. So all it's saying is that what gets submitted as a document to the planning board is a list of information that was gathered from the outreach from interested and knowledgeable parties. It doesn't say anything more restrictive than that.
Thank you, Michael. Anybody else have any? Evan, you're gonna have to unmute yourself though.
Thank you, ma'am. I'd just like to say thanks for everybody. I see we've got something like 50 people on the call. To all everyone's work, getting back into the bylaw before, we're getting into our, somewhat imminent permit submissions here this summer when Andrew's going to carry everything forward. I think my biggest concern at the beginning when I was looking at the sites and, the permit setups was that there may not be a way through the maze. But I think we've gotten pretty close and clear here that, there is a way through. It, of course, requires a lot of work and a lot of coordination, which I expect AMP will have no shortage of, especially with Andrew at the helm. So I just like to say thank you for working through this and considering the bylaw change on the access part to clean that up for us, because it was going to be a weird thing to submit with that being in place. And I think, Andrew, I'm going to hand it off to him here, but I think you're going to have a good time working through all this diligence. And together, I think there are a lot of parts of this process that can inform a lot of other towns on I say harder or more valuable way to do this, in the forest towns, and especially with some high hurdles like we've talked about tonight. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Evan.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. Thank you, Evan. So yeah, just to reiterate, we just want to keep the communication lines open, figure out how we can work this through together. Thank you so much for looking into these issues and looking to help us with the access issue. I think that's a really strong start, and I really appreciate the town going through those efforts to make those, well, lack of a better term, inroads into moving things forward. So I really appreciate that. And I'm here as a resource. I obviously don't want to be taking a lot of conversations offline if that's going to conflict with any sort of open meeting rules. But please, I'd be happy to have conversations with folks as questions come up as needed. And I'm happy to share my contact information as appropriate if anybody needs to get in touch with me for any reason whatsoever. So I'm not sure how best to do that, but just please let me know if I can share that somehow. Just let me know how I can help with this. Thank you.
My suggestion, Andrew, would be at least sending it to Becky so she can get it to everyone here who might need it.
Okay, thank you. I'll do that right now.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions, April or Rita? Is there anything that is left vague or in question? No?
The only question I would have for the planning board is what you're anticipating in terms of drafting an amendment to the zoning bylaw, it sounds like, and the hearing process and so forth, what that schedule looks like if you have thought about it.
And to add that, town meeting is June 12th. So we just have that in mind. Jeff, go ahead.
It's one sentence, and Donna has refined it a little bit. We have a little bit of substance to talk about, but it's essentially one sentence, very near where we're at now. And we need to talk about where it gets inserted in the zoning bylaw. But we're just about done with that, and we're anticipating. Let's see, what do? We ship it to the select board, and then the select board ships it back to us, and then we hold a public hearing, and then it can go to town meeting.
Great.
That's the way it goes.
Yeah, and I was
easily ready by June 12th, Rita. Easily.
Yeah, and just in thinking about it, just since it wasn't on the agenda, but the select board's already, seen and approved the associate member one. So we have that other hearing. I don't think the planning board has scheduled another April meeting. We're doing this 1 week earlier. So we just have to make sure that, at our May meetings, we're covering the bases. But I agree with Donna. It's a sentence is a sentence, and Donna's already crafted the refined version. So we're pretty good.
I would add that if need be, we certainly can schedule another meeting before May.
Yeah, April's just started. Becky.
The assessors had brought forward a question about the mapping, and the planning board said they didn't weren't at that point ready to do any amendments, but since there's an amendment already on the table, is that something the planning board might consider?
No, this is exactly why I jumped in and corrected Donna, because the amendment is to the zoning bylaw, not to the solar bylaw. The map is connected to the solar bylaw. I think we're talking about amending the use table, not opening up the solar bylaw for discussion. And Kevin did bring that up a few months ago, and we had a discussion. So I think we're trying to correct the use table, not revisit the solar bylaw at this point, is what we told him at that point.
Kevin does have a comment there. Go ahead, Kevin.
No, just the reasons were explained to me, and it was a decision by the Board of Assessors, and I took it to request it. I took it back to them, and we've agreed to wait until the time is right to do any tweaks to the solar bylaw. But I just also like to point out, on a much higher level of the town, within the last 2 weeks, the governor did sign the final version of the so-called climate change bill. And so where that relates to this is once and for all, court cases and ATB cases aside, a project like AMPS is taxable in either of two ways: directly via personal property tax or through a negotiated pilot with the town. That is the language that the Mass Assessors sought for 8 years. It was in the final bill that was signed. And as a member of the legislative committee, I'm very proud of the fact it's done. So those, just so Andrew knows, those are the options, and everybody knows if it goes forward, it's either, if any one of these is approved, it's either a pilot or direct personal property taxation.
That's very good news.
Yeah, and if you're a homeowner, once and for all, you're now exempt of putting it on your rooftop unless you generate more than 125% of your need. Same thing for farmers, etc. But the one related to this matter is that commercial and large-scale solar is now codified as either the assessors directly value and assess a personal property, or a pilot is negotiated. But I just wanted everybody to know that's the way it goes.
Done deal.
There's no, as Donna's probably happy, there's no more ambiguity now after about 8 years of court cases all over the state. It's done and settled.
I just want to, sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Becky. Your microphone is slightly quiet. Is there something in front of your microphone?
It's probably just my voice.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
The reason it is important, and we're happy that this is settled, as we were finishing off and trying to negotiate the last pilot, we went back and round in circles with that language because we had to protect the town and make sure that we got to the point where this legislation got through, so we were able to negotiate the full pilot as we did without threat of losing it. So
yeah, you had the language in there that if the courts threw it out, they still had to pay it.
Right.
But yeah, this resolves close to, geez, I've been dealing with this for 6 years, but about 8 years of state court cases at various levels and appellate tax board cases. And it basically cleans up all the outstanding issues and I will point out the solar industry agreed to the language. It was negotiated with them, and it was the part that the governor did not veto twice. So it stayed the same through all three versions, including the one the governor finally signed within the last 8 to 10 days.
Good. Okay. Does anybody have any other questions or such that they'd like to add?
Have any other concerns about the bylaw itself?
Do I? Or the select board? Anyone?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone have any other concerns about the bylaw? No? No? Rita, April? Since that's our committee? No? No? Okay, let me just check the second page. There are 2 pages of Zoom. Okay. Raise your hand if you do. All right, I don't see any. So I think that's it, unless anyone else has any further comment.
I just have a process question for Deacon. Are we staying on or are we all adjourning?
I think we can adjourn after we're done here.
Okay.
Can I just ask a quick question? Pardon me.
Please, go ahead.
Just so I'm aware of what you would all prefer moving forward for conversations to kind of proceed in terms of letting you know if there's any sort of friction with us trying to move forward with a potential project. How would you recommend I best go through that process, whether it's just attending solely meetings like this, shooting an email to somebody just to kind of voice things that are coming up? I think dealing with the access issue really is the big one. So I don't really know what else potentially could be on the radar right now, but I just want to make sure I know kind of the proper procedure you would all be most comfortable with.
Well, if it's certainly, I'll go ahead, Becky. I was gonna go ahead. Okay,
Okay.
so in general, I'm going to give, and Becky can correct me if I'm wrong. The select board certainly, to the select board email, all three of us get the emails for select board at shutesbury.org. Okay. And Becky, it is helpful if you do send emails to other committees that you include Becky, so she can make sure that no open meeting law is sure. She can help keep an eye on that. So that's kind of the process I'm thinking about. But Becky, was there something that I missed?
I just wanted to point out, Becky is our town administrator.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank
you.
So
you may not be aware of that. And so she's central in this process.
Right. And Andrew, I guess I would say, the planning board is going to be the recipient of your proposals because we're going to be, if you're applying for a special permit, we'll be receiving them. I think in the past, we've invited is if people had questions that within reason, that those could be, fielded generally speaking. But if you're talking about specific proposals, the planning board is the body you're coming to. So,
and just to point out, Deacon Bonner is the chair of that committee. Yeah. Deacon Bonner.
Even though I talk a lot, he's the chair.
That's right. I just.
Becky, it might be helpful for you to give Andrew, I know Evan has some of this information, but Andrew, a list of who's on the committees, who's chair and their positions to make it helpful. Andrew, would that be helpful for you?
That would be fantastic. Thank you. That would make my life really easy.
We have a really good website, andrewshutesbury.org. It's a great website for a little town.
You better believe I've already had a bunch of these bookmarked on the website, so I am no stranger to the website, but that's great. Thank you. That'd be a huge help.
You're welcome. Jeff, go ahead.
Just like the Zoning Board of Appeals, we on the planning board do education and guidance. It's what we call it. When applicants come in, maybe usually prior to their submitting anything and want to find out how the bylaws work and how we interpret things and what do these words mean and which do you have to do first, this or that. We answer those kind of questions all the time. Usually before you've committed a lot of time and money and energy into going down some direction you're not sure of.
Thank you. That would be also a huge help. I find myself pressed for time these days, so that'd be great. Thanks.
Becky, you also had a comment too. Oh, yeah, Becky and then Evan. Go ahead.
I just want to remind all of our committees that when you're working in a group of 2 or more people, you're creating a subcommittee, and we need to have those meetings posted, and they need to be in response to open meeting law. And that's the town standard. That's what Finance Committee is doing. That's what COA is doing. And I've noted there's a couple committees here that aren't always doing that. So I'm encouraging you to make sure open meeting law is followed.
I guess I'd ask Donna, because if it's sub quorum, and you're not identifying as a committee, members can work together practically. I don't see why it's out of, I mean, subcommittees, yes, are open to open meeting law, but if you're not a subcommittee, then you're not.
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Yeah, I was making a statement, not asking you, but.
Yeah, I mean, technically the most obvious example of a subcommittee is one that's appointed by the chair. That doesn't mean that every subcommittee is appointed by the chair. If a group of people really get working on, say, an amendment to the zoning bylaw that's a large project and they're working week after week after week, that's probably going to ultimately be a subcommittee. But subcommittees technically are appointed by the chair. I'm more worried about serial communications because I think those are the ones that I'm finding my boards are violating the most without realizing it. And serial communications are essentially, say, I'll use the select board as an example because we know they wouldn't do it. But say the select board gave Becky, one of the select board members gave Becky an opinion, and Becky passed that on to another select board member who passed an opinion back to Becky, and Becky passed both those on to the third member. That essentially would be an open meeting law violation because they're meeting and discussing something essentially or deliberating on something. They're just doing it through Becky rather than personally. And that can be, that's an open meeting law violation. And those are becoming more and more cited in the open meeting law and by the AG's office. So I think that the thing you want to be more careful of is serial ones, but I agree with Becky. If you look and are acting like a subcommittee, post and take minutes. There's no, it's not that big a deal. And if you do it, then we don't have to worry about open meeting law violations. And there's a lot of critical things that we're trying to accomplish here to see if we can get this off the ground. And so we don't need open meeting law challenges, and our time and expenses wasted on open meeting law complaints and answers and meetings on it and AG appeals and all of that, when it's so easy to just post and take minutes.
I guess I'd like to push back, Donna, because
of course.
Yeah, well, you know, that's what I do. So I, you know, the serial part, obviously, you know, at least I've been around long enough to know about that. It would be nice to actually get a definition of, you know, subcommittee, because technically speaking, like using the language that you and I worked on with Jeff, I think I initiated and said, Jeff, you know, you had mentioned something about changing the use table. What would that look like? And he wrote something up and wrote it back to him. Deacon was not involved at all. So that's 2 members who are, you know, exchanging. There's 2 of us out of 7. So it's way sub quorum.
Yeah, I don't think you and Jeff were a subcommittee because you were decided to take on drafting this bylaw.
Right. But I pushed back.
That doesn't mean you couldn't be a subcommittee, and that's what I'm trying to push back on with you.
Yeah, I guess I'm just pushing back because what, you know, categorically what Becky said is 2 or more people are a subcommittee, and I don't think that's an accurate statement.
True. I do think Susie has her hand up, who was the town clerk at one point.
Yeah. The subcommittee references in the open meeting law have nothing to do with quorum. It has to do with people who are deliberating and discussing matters that are relevant to their committee. And so, yes, 2 people do, if they're sitting there and discussing without it being publicly posted, without minutes being taken, they are violating open meting law.
Then how do you...
You can read it in the open meeting law guide. But
Susie,
it has nothing to do with quorum. So that's a problem. If you define it that way, you aren't keeping within open meeting law.
So Susie, how do you reconcile the fact?
Whoa. Let's narrow this down. Susie, we understand it doesn't have to do with quorum. The question becomes, is the informality of 2 members of a board not appointed as a subcommittee, not tasked with something, just discussing something, is that a violation of the open meeting law? And I don't believe it is.
I don't either.
And I believe it is. And I believe it's because it doesn't matter if they didn't get tasked, if they're performing the work of the committee because they have volunteered to do it. And it's not being shared in an open meeting forum. It's not transparent. The public isn't aware that this is going on. That is in violation of open meeting law.
But by definition, Susie, that means that nowhere in Massachusetts can more than one person can't talk to another person, is what you're saying, on any substance. And my understanding from open meeting law training is that you can talk to other members sub quorum, But the way you're saying it is if I talk to one other person, then that's a violation. And I don't think that's accurate.
Because
you can't make decisions. You can't deliberate.
Well,
you can't make decisions. It's about the content of what you're doing and the role that you're performing. If you're making decisions on behalf of the community has a right to know what you're saying.
But Grace, if the decision is, hey, that looks good, we should bring it to the planning board to discuss, there's no formal discussion. It's it's a
well, and it's
right,
not a decision. It's not a decision-making role.
Those conversations are supposed to happen with the chair. Members of committees can say, hey, chair, this sounds great, and I think we should talk about it at our next meeting.
Correct.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But if you have two members talking to each other, okay, this is what we're planning, this is the document that we're drafting, this is what we're going to bring and we're going to vote on at the next meeting, that's a subcommittee, and that needs to be publicly accessible.
I do see Attorney Pill's hand up.
Michael.
Yes.
You may notice Donna's gray hair and mine. I think practicing law, we've probably both earned it one strand at a time. And what Donna shared with you, and this debate that's gone on makes her point, is that you win without fighting the battle, to quote Sun Tzu. She said, if you post it, you have eliminated the entire issue and you don't have to worry about it. And so heed Donna's words of wisdom on that point. Eliminate the whole thing, and then you don't have to worry about this debate. You err on the side of caution and nobody will hassle you. You know, there's no harm in posting a meeting that maybe you didn't have to post, but the harm is if some smart ass lawyer, and I'm not going to get involved in this, not in this one, but you never know who's out there, or some citizen who may disagree. And every citizen has a right. You don't need a lawyer to make one of these complaints, and people can justifiably get very concerned about the public's business being done in public. So heed Donna's words of wisdom, post it, and you've eliminated the whole issue. Thank you.
I saw Miriam and Jeff. Miriam.
So one question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Evan. Miriam, hold on. Evan had a point.
I was going to go on a new topic. So if the other two people have some follow-ons, I'll wait till.
You're after Jeff. You're after Jeff. Go ahead, Miriam.
So maybe Donna and et al, you can comment on this, but what about in situations, because there have been several of these, and where members, a subset of a committee went on sort of a fact-finding meeting to talk to some outside party and bring information back to their board. That's not a deliberation.
Yeah,
doing
that's
what minutes are for.
Yeah, that would be.
Take minutes. Take minutes.
Miriam, that would be a subcommittee, and I would post that.
Is there, but Donna, in terms of like, would that be equivalent to a site visit?
No, I think that Miriam's talking about is the Historical Commission has 5 members and 2 are tasked with going to meet with the tribal preservation officer and, you know, get an outline of something to bring back. I would post that.
But practically then, I mean, I get Michael's point and your point, but practically speaking, if you're going to do that, especially in the era of COVID, if you can't provide a Zoom alternative, then it's not an open meeting, which practically means that you can't have the meeting.
That's not true. You don't have to do Zoom for it to be an open meeting.
But how, it's a legitimate question. How would you go off-site where you don't have access to the internet and create Zoom, and, you know, posting it on the website is one thing, but the whole
idea. You can
idea
record it and post it on the website, the recording.
Well, you can also, if you can't provide virtual access, then the minutes are acceptable as a substitute in terms of public access according to the governor's emergency order.
That's nice to know.
Melissa, Linda has had her hand up off and
I'm
on.
sorry. I'm sorry.
I know,
Linda,
you just
let me
see
check
her.
in with Linda. Hold on. Linda, things going too quickly?
Yes, I would ask for some
names.
So raising
Slow
of
down.
hands. It's hard to take minutes if people are talking over one another.
Okay, thank you for the reminder, Linda.
And
The
also,
other thing, The other thought, I'm sorry, the other thought to Michael's point, if you can't, you can always do it with a conference call on a phone and put the conference call dial-in information too.
Well, I think the message is, you know, more open the better. You know, to have, this is a really complicated thing we're involved with, and you know, divisiveness breeds in sort of in secrecy or in subsets. So I think it's really important that we be open, even if it takes a little longer.
Yeah. Right, but I would point out that in for instance, drafting the bylaw, if Jeff drafts something and sends it to town council for review, that is not a violation of the open meeting law. That's, here's what I'm going to present to the planning board as an individual. And, you know, if Michael sees it too, I don't believe that's a violation of the open meeting law. They're not deliberating. They're not making a decision because they don't have the authority to make a decision as two people. It's like drafting a decision for a special permit. You know, you can work on it because you're tasked with it and you don't have to do it in open. So I think that while I agree with Grace and Susie, and I certainly agree with what Michael Pill said, that, you know, if you can post and there's no reason not to, don't. But if you're trying to just get a draft of something done for the planning board to work on, if you have to post every time an email goes, you're never going to get it done. So it's I wish it was as black and white as everybody makes it sound. It's certainly that way on either end of the spectrum, but as you get to the middle, you just want to be as transparent as you can possibly be, but you need to get the work done.
Jeff, you had your hand up for a while.
Sure. I think it's a wise thing to do on the planning board. When we have these outside assignments, sometimes I get them, sometimes Michael gets them, sometimes others, you know, to draft something up or do something, you know, to principally take it on ourselves, maybe speak with town council. But there are occasions when I may want to bounce something off of Michael or Steve or somebody else, you know, not going in any serial fashion, but just some other member that might be interested in looking at what I did. I'm principally responsible for it, and I'm going to bring it back to the planning board to look at. But perhaps having the benefit of some other members' input. And
the select board's process has been, say Rita is tasked with drafting something, it goes to, we all get a copy of it, and all of our comments go to one neutral place. You know, in our case, it goes to the town administrator. And so there's no outside deliberation, but there is an avenue to exchange ideas or to have differences included.
Yeah, but you guys are different because you can't even talk to each other without being a quorum.
Right. And you have an administrator.
We have 7 members.
And we do have a town administrator.
I have a metaphor that is useful, which is that, sorry, there's another door open, so I'm hearing my voice echo and it's confusing. When I sometimes at work, I text my sisters and say, let's get takeout tonight. And that's a suggestion of something we're gonna do. But I wait until I get home and we can all talk together before we decide what we're gonna get. Right. And that's the kind of difference. We can decide, in order to function, we need to be able to have conversations. Hey, we need to talk about this on this day. But we wait until we're in a public venue to have those conversations because we're having those conversations on the public's behalf.
So Grace, I guess I would pick up on that an example, because I feel like the reason I think quorum matters is because quorum determines if you can make a decision or not. If you're a subcommittee of 3 people, your quorum is probably 2. Okay. And so once you become a subcommittee, you have a quorum. If 2 members are exchanging ideas and they're unable of making a decision because they are not a quorum, then by definition, they have to bring it back to the full body to have a full discussion and deliberation before making a decision. So that's how I've seen it.
I understand what you're saying, but content trumps numbers. It's about what you're doing.
No, I'm not talking about numbers. I'm talking about the numbers inform if you can make a decision or not.
No, I think Grace, no, it's more subtle than that, Michael. And I think that's what Grace is trying to get across. You're right. You start with a quorum. If there's a quorum and they're sitting and talking, that's clearly needs to be an open meeting. And clearly on the other end of the spectrum, if it's one person drafting a document, it's not an open meeting. And as you move towards the center of that continuum, if in fact, say Jeff drafts a bylaw that's going to go back to the full board and he sends it to you and says, this is what I'm thinking of, and you don't redraft and you don't comment back and you're just thinking about it, or he says, I've sent this to Donna and she's going to get back to me on it, that's not an open meeting law violation. You're not deliberating. You're not giving your opinion back. You're not communicating with each other. 2, 3, 5 members, it's not. But if Jeff drafts it, sends it to you, you comment, you redraft and send it back, comes to me, I change it and send it back, and the three of us are, really deliberating because town council's in it, you're safe. I wasn't in it, it may become questionably an open meeting law violation. And it's going to depend. I'm not saying just because Jeff drafts something and sends it to you, that's an open meeting law violation. I don't think it is. It's going to depend on whether Deacon tasked you with it. It's going to depend on how much communication there is. There's just so many pieces involved in whether it's an open meeting law violation. But I think that one thing that was said that was really, really true, the open meeting law is not supposed to stop you from getting work done. And if you're drafting a document and it's sent to you and you make some comments back, but it's not the final document and the whole thing's going to the planning board and the planning board's going to deliberate, planning board's going to decide the final document, the planning board's going to set up the schedule for the public hearing, for going to selectmen and everything. I don't think that's an open meeting law violation because it's all going to be done in public and everybody's going to know what's going on. If in fact you're tasked with drafting it and you come with the final version without the planning board having any input on whether they like it or not, what the process is going to be and everything, I think that would be an open meeting law violation. And so it's just when you get down to that center of the continuum, it's just not as easy as it is or it isn't. And so when you start questioning, if a red flag is raised, if you're worried about it being an open meeting law violation, post. And if you're not, if you feel like you're far enough on the continuum that it's not an open meeting law violation, then get the work done.
Okay, I got 3 quick things. One is that last scenario would never happen because, you never bring a final thing to the group because it's never final. So that's like off the table. I guess the genuine question is, I hear you disagreeing with Grace and Susie. So as for the rest of us, no.
I don't think she's disagreeing. I don't think she's disagreeing. I think that she's emphasizing other points.
Yeah, I know, but Susie's shaking her head like she's wrong. So it's hard for a committee member to figure that out. And the third part, just practically speaking, we have this one sentence. If we move it to the planning board the way Donna wrote it, or Jeff and Donna do, then the planning board can discuss it. But it's, if Jeff wants some input from someone besides Donna, we're going to have to wait until we have a meeting, it sounds like. And then, you guys wanting to move it forward in terms of town meeting gets a little tricky.
Michael, you always do this. You always come with the most absurd example that is going to, end everything, which is never going to happen. The truth of the matter is, there's till June 12th. There is plenty of time for a really bad draft to go to the planning board, for the planning board to completely rewrite it at an open meeting, for a public hearing to be held 2 weeks after that, and then for you to get to June 12th and get it voted. Right. You just always do that, where you come up with the most absurd example to try and prove your point.
No, I'm just saying you and Jeff can work together.
People meeting and deliberating can violate the open meeting law, even on a planning board of 5 or 7, depending on what they're discussing, how they're discussing it, and where they're going. 2 people can work on something and not be a violation of the open meeting law. You're not going to get a definitive answer no matter how many examples you give me.
Okay.
So a good idea might be
if anyone has specific questions, I am here to talk those questions through.
That's true. And if it feels like it might be a subcommittee, ask the chair to establish a subcommittee to make it above board. And, you know, so that's always the option too. Right.
And yeah. Err on the side of openness.
Yes. Right. And transparency. True. Yeah. Susie, you had a question, and I do see Miriam's hand again.
So in the open meeting law, when it says these types of communications generally will not constitute deliberations, provided that when these materials are distributed, no member of the public body expresses an opinion or matters within the body's jurisdiction. And so when Jeff says he wants to send something out and bounce it off of somebody, that's a discussion. And you can't do that. You have to bring it back to the whole meeting, or you have to have a posted subcommittee meeting and you have to print the minutes so that people can know what was being discussed.
If that communication is between a quorum of a public body, and a subcommittee, according to the law, shall include any multiple member body created to advise or make recommendations to a public body. So a communication between 2 members of a public body that are not created to advise or provide recommendations to a public body is not a communication between a quorum of a public body.
Talking.
It was Nathan Murphy from the planning board.
Sorry, yeah.
Nathan, that particular thing is specifically addressed in the open meeting law training videos that you can watch if you go to the town clerk website. There are links. Okay. It is 2 people. 2 people can be. It can apply basically. Yeah.
Could I ask a question? Could I ask a question? This is a fascinating discussion. I appreciate it, actually. It's very helpful. So what I'm hearing is that we could, for example, if we were having a meeting where we could not Zoom, we could post the meeting and submit minutes. Is that what is being said? And
when I say you can't Zoom, I mean like if there was a blackout in town and literally no one had internet access.
I don't think it has to be that. I don't think it has to be that dramatic, Grace. I think that if they're going, say if they're going to meet with a tribal preservation officer, and a lot of the discussions around specific sites, which needs to be done in executive session. And so
I mean,
a good part of the conversation is going to be done in executive session because they're talking about specifics. Then the opening of the meeting and the closing of the meeting have to be done in open and stuff.
No, I was thinking more like if it had to be on a site visit. Now I understand the concept.
Site visits are not open meeting. Site visits are not open meeting.
Is that true for other boards besides the Concom and the Planning Board?
Absolutely. No site visits are part of an open meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, you just like, what I mean is that you can't decide you'd rather not use Zoom and say that's the reason you're not using Zoom. Like it has to be, you really can't provide that access to the public.
Okay. It has to be literally physically impossible. Right.
Yeah, I mean,
virtually impossible.
Virtually impossible. There you go. Okay. I think we lost Evan. Andrew, can you confirm that? I don't see him on here.
I think he had to drop off.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
I will send him an apology.
Probably got real tired of this conversation.
I'm still here.
And what's the matter with you?
My mom says I'm not very bright, I guess.
Yeah, this is our town process.
And we haven't really talked about open meeting law in a significant way in a while.
No, this has been fun.
Good. Yeah, this is good.
I love it. This is like what I spend all day, every day obsessing over. So.
I understand that. Yeah, I understand that.
So, okay, here's another example. Just throwing out, because I want to get this right. If 2 or more historical commissioners would like to go to the old town hall to take a look in the storage closet, which is long overdue and we need to do that, we probably cannot Zoom that because I don't think there's any internet available in the old town hall.
I think there could be a site visit.
Is that a site visit?
It could be, but you can also post and take minutes because it's about, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's easy to post and I can always make it easier if it needs to be easier.
Okay.
But yeah.
No, it's okay.
Thank you, Grace. Susie, I see your hand again.
I do think this is something that every time we get new people on board or new interactions, it needs to be reviewed. And so Grace says there's videos available. The state is very adamant about offering trainings because instead of answering each small situation, there is like an overarching understanding. And the workshop I went to, the guy was very, very clear. And then we have the guides and the videos. So I do think it's time for people to revisit this because violating it really is a problem. So
and the guide is very easy reading, very easy reading.
The videos I've got on my website, they're basically the same thing as the guide. I found them, it's easier for me to cite the guide, but I remember what's in the videos better. So I definitely recommend studying both.
Good point. Does anybody else have any further questions at this point about the bylaws or open meeting? Because we've done both things now.
I'll just email everyone. Sorry.
Okay, there you go. Just, everybody. When in doubt.
Yeah. Be open.
Right.
Yep.
Becky, go ahead. You're muted. There.
I wasn't muted.
Oh, you.
Rita had to jump off. She wanted me to let you know.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
I thought she did. So, should we adjourn, or
I think we're all
going to do more of
this.
this?
There's anything further?
I'm good.
You're good. Okay. Donna, thank you very much for coming. The planning board, thank you for coming.
Night all.
We have to close it. Don't sign us out. We have to.
No, I won't. And the Historical Commission, thank you for joining us, and everybody else watching in the wings. Thank you so much.
Close out all your meetings.
Okay. Who wants to start? Why don't you go, Miriam? Close out.
Henry, you want to do it?
All right. So Historical Commission officially adjourns.
You got a roll call.
Roll call. Yes. We've got Miriam, defense.
Aye.
Greg Colton. Greg.
He's muted.
You're
yes,
muted.
Yes, that is, yes, I agree.
Okay. Mary Lou Conga. Mary Lou.
You'll want to unmute yourself if you're muted.
You're muted. Is Janice still on?
I do not see her.
Okay. So that's Mary Lou.
She posted a hand raise, so that might have.
She raised her hand?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
There she is.
Okay.
Mary Lou, you'll have to unmute if you want to say something. She is trying to raise her hand. I'm not sure she's raising in the affirmative to adjourn or.
That's how I'd interpret it.
I'll interpret it that way because I'm not sure she's able to. Okay. So I think you got everybody, Henry.
Then we're officially adjourned.
Okay. Planning board?
Okay, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Second.
Did you get that, Linda?
No.
She's still writing notes from that conversation about open meeting law.
Yeah. I wasn't sure who made the motion and who seconded.
I tried to make the motion.
Okay. And was it Michael DeCaro who seconded?
Me and Nathan, either one.
Nathan, yeah.
Okay, so I'll call.
He was a nanosecond behind me.
Yeah. Okay. So
nanoseconds.
So Jeff?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Linda?
Aye.
Nathan?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. We're
Okay.
adjourned.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion from the select board?
I'm moved.
Good night, all.
Okay. I'll second that since Rita had to leave. All in favor?
Stein, aye.
Makepeace O'Neill, aye.
That was easy.
That was. A small board is nice.
Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for coming.
Thank you very much
Nice
for
to
having
meet
me.
you. Nice to
You
meet
too.
you.
Thanks. Bye.
And did you need something, Becky?
No, I was just telling Andrew I would reply to his email. Bye. Thank you, Deacon.
Thank you.